we've got to talk about Chelsea, because right now it's nearly the middle of July and we still haven't replaced the holding midfielder. Moises Caicedo still isn't a done deal. Apparently, we're still edging closer, and it feels like we've been doing that since the last week of June. Brighton's price is high, but that's because that's what he's worth to Brighton. Chelsea have almost played their cards horrifically again. We look so desperate for a midfielder in this role. We are completely focusing our whole attention to this one position. So Brighton know they can hold Chelsea to a price that is ridiculously high for the player that we are looking at to buy, which is Moises Caicedo. I'm not saying he's a bad player, but what I am saying is the price we're about to pay would have potentially got us a far better player if teams weren't as aware of how desperate Chelsea were in this position. If we hadn't got rid of, say, the 4 or 5 midfielders that we have so far this summer, actually teams might go, Chelsea have loads of midfielders. They're not ridiculously desperate. They'll pay a bit, but they might say, do you know what, don't worry. Right now, Chelsea probably have 1.5. 1.5 players capable of starting in that role going into the season. And that is probably Enzo and Conor Gallagher. Conor Gallagher in that role, it's not his best position. He'll fight, he'll work hard, but I think even he'd admit to you that if he was deployed in the double pivot, he would probably tell you that isn't his best position. Enzo, I think he's capable of playing there alongside someone who has the legs and the high energy to benefit Enzo's game. Now, the reason this deal's not being done is because apparently Chelsea are asking for a payment structure again, and Brighton are asking for a higher fee because of the payment structure. It kind of makes sense. That's what happens to everyday people like us that want to pay for things that are a little bit too expensive, and they try and spread the payments over a certain amount of time. You see it with things that are like beds and sofas and all sorts of furniture and stuff like that, kitchens, cars, whatever. You end up paying more on interest to get the item that you want. Right, and that's what's happening right now with Chelsea and Tony Bloom, the owner of Brighton. He's saying to Chelsea, if you want this player, you can have him if you want to pay like that, but I'm going to charge you interest. And that's why this deal simply hasn't happened, because Chelsea are trying to negotiate this down. And I'm hearing that Pochettino's really keen to get someone in ASAP. We fly to America this week. Now, whether or not it will be done, I'm not too sure. But to be honest with you, whatever Brighton are asking for, Chelsea simply need to pay it. If we don't have those funds available and we won't be able to make those payments, then simply we're looking at a player that we can't afford. It's as simple as that. Right now, though, Chelsea's midfield is in such a dire situation that if we don't get a player in, it will almost delay us by 1 month going into the next season, because that player would have lost out on all that time in pre-season, a month right now to the end of the season, to bond with his teammates, learn how his teammates perform on the pitch, learn his manager's tactics, and find out what's expected of him in a new system that he's never played before. And there may be language barriers as well. And let's look at this. This guy isn't ridiculously experienced as well, which can sometimes be a good thing, can sometimes be a negative thing. It might mean he's more easily moldable because he's seen less success in different formations, but it might also mean that he doesn't know how to adapt to different situations. Even though he has been at a few clubs, it's not like his first transfer. But I just think Chelsea need to get this done. I think he's a good player. I think we're being charged over the top. But the situation Chelsea are in right now, for Brighton, the demand is there and the supply is low, so they can charge more money. It's really, really simple to work out. It's just very frustrating as a Chelsea fan right now that we've just had one of the worst seasons ever in the club's history, and we still are pondering about the transfer market, trying to play it cool, when really we're not actually in a situation to play it cool and try and act not desperate, when it's so obvious to everyone that we are ridiculously lacking in that area of the pitch. So that's the midfield sort of debate over. I think hopefully we can get that player in. If we can't, quite simply, and Brighton are digging their heels in and we can't afford those payments, we need to look elsewhere. Because right now, as much as I think he'd be a good fit, we are in a poor position. What I will say, though, is honestly, for the prices that have been thrown around in football right now, there's a definite bargain staring us in the face. And the reports I'm hearing are that Chelsea aren't actually interested. And that's for Paulo Dybala. 12 million euros apparently is the figure being chucked around, or 15 or something like that, in and around that amount to non-Italian clubs. I can't understand why Chelsea feel like this is a poor deal. We're looking to pay similar amounts for youngsters from Brazil who are under that age, who probably have higher ceilings than Dybala has right now, but Dybala was probably at that point in his career and is a great example of where careers can go for potential wonder kids. So right now, for pure footballing ability, for players who are coming out in the squad saying they hope that he joins, apparently the rumours are that Chelsea aren't actually interested in him because of his age. And when I think for 12 million, that's an absolute bargain when we've seen, one, our lack of strike force, and two, the lack of creativity. And Dybala has both strings to his bow. Like, I cannot understand for the life of me why Chelsea don't think that Paulo Dybala in and around the £15 million mark is an absolute steal and should have made it happen and should have taken one person away from the Caicedo negotiations, sent them over to Rome and got this deal done. I just don't understand where Chelsea are at right now. We're signing all these young players, which I do understand is a separate transfer kitty and separate people are working on those and we're bringing them in. But if they're coming into the first team, then is that actually the case? What are we doing? Now, if these players turn out to be well beaters, then fine. Look, and actually from what I've seen, Angelo looks very good, looks very promising. And he could be a definite asset for Chelsea Football Club moving forward. However, I just think that we're looking at Dybala and players are publicly stating how they would love to have him at the club and we're not doing anything about it. And then we look at a couple of other positions. We are still incredibly weak and unsure of what our attack looks like. We've seen Fofana move on loan to Union Berlin, which I think is a really good move. Talking about the rest of our strike force, Broja has recovered from injury ridiculously quickly. Will he ever be the same player? We don't know. We've seen the likes of Ruben Loftus-Cheek, Callum Hudson-Odoi have injuries at a young age, and it hindered their careers massively. And Nkunku has played as a number 9 before, but probably isn't a direct number 9. Neither, by the way, is he a definite number 10 or a winger. I'm not sure where his future lies for Chelsea. He may end up directly up front if we don't sign anyone. He could end up playing in the 10, but when I looked at his creativity stats, they are good. However, the type of number 10 that I think people are expecting from him probably isn't what he is. So it'll just be interesting to see how Nkunku works out. I'm seeing all different types of links for Vlahovic and a couple of other strikers. And Nicholas Jackson's obviously coming as well, but no one really knows what to expect from him. His last few months in Spain were great. His ones before that, horrific. So no one really knows who's going to be leading the line for Chelsea going into this season. And most importantly, the manager doesn't. And again, he's got a few games in America to look at, but we all know that pre-season sometimes doesn't really mean much. So Chelsea need to get their act together. In 1 month, we still need at least 2 players if we want to be competing for European places. I think it's an almost no-brainer for us to go and inquire about Harry Kane. Maybe we have, maybe it was a flat-out no, as it's Tottenham, but the Pochettino link screams that we should be paying 150 million just to secure those services. If we secured Harry Kane on a 5-6 year deal at 29, 30 years old, I guarantee you Chelsea would win the league in the period that he was a Chelsea player. Now, let's move away from the strike force. Goalkeeper is the last thing I want to talk about because these are the main areas Chelsea need to improve right now if we want to see ourselves at the back at the top of the Premier League. And goalkeeper right now, it just looks increasingly likely that Kepa Arrizabalaga is going to be Chelsea's goalie going into next season. This worries me so much. It worries me more than I think some Chelsea fans are letting on. If you think Chelsea can achieve anything remotely successful or comparable in success to what they've achieved in the last 20 years, with Kepa in goal this season, you are wrong. And I know football is opinions and not facts, but unfortunately, I just don't see it happening with Kepa. He's had so many chances at Chelsea, and he's proven time and time again that he simply isn't good enough. Now, I've seen people talking about Raya. I've even heard David De Gea being mentioned. To be honest, Raya isn't better than Kepa. David De Gea probably a slight improvement, but I still would be wary about that one. We've seen the mistakes he's made, and he finished clean sheet leader this season, and he had an abysmal season for what I would think most Manchester United fans would say to you. So realistically, we're looking at a very bleak, limited selection of goalkeepers available for Chelsea this summer. Mike Maignan at AC Milan is probably the leader of that pack and is a very, very good goalkeeper, but the likelihood of that happening for Chelsea is very, very minimal right now. We looked at Onana, obviously. He's going to find himself at Manchester United. We have absolutely dodged a bullet there, mark my words. The way he plays in the Premier League, I am concerned for him as a person and the trauma he might face against some teams and how they play. It's a very, very different league to Holland and to Italy. So it could be Fabian Barthez 2.0. But we move into the 31-day countdown to the start of the Premier League, and Chelsea still haven't addressed those options. Right now, for Chelsea to get anything right, we need to be signing a player in each of those positions every 10 days. And on the last few weeks of the transfer window, the likelihood of that happening is very, very small. So, let's see what happens. Make sure to subscribe if you're new. Keep up to date with the Chelsea content. I know it's very weird and quiet right now for Chelsea content, so expect to see other stuff from other teams and other leagues, and maybe some fantasy football, because I've got a first draft coming for you. And I'll catch you in the next one.